Within our Christmas traditions, we have a large amount of symbolism, but it goes unnoticed by most of us. Let's start with the Christmas tree, which is used in millions of homes around the world. Since ancient times, the tree has been a symbol of life. Because it loses leaves and renews them every year, it is associated with death and resurrection. Among the Norse myths, we discovered that the tree was the center of the universe. For the Germans, vegetation was also associated with the mortal agony of the sun. The ancient Indo-Europeans observed that towards the middle of winter, the sun remained motionless near the southern east and then gradually rose. This astronomical phenomenon was known as the day of the solstice. In Norse mythology, they believed that the world and all the stars were held dependent on the branches of a gigantic tree called the divine Yggdrasil, which they worshipped every year on the winter solstice, when they believed that life was renewed. The celebration of that day consisted of decorating an oak tree with torches that represented the stars. Around it they danced and sang in worship of the god. They say that Saint Boniface, evangelizer of Germany, cut down the tree that represented Odin, and in the same place planted a pine tree, a symbol of the perennial and merciful love of God, and decorated it with apples and candles, giving it Christian symbolism. Here the apples represented the temptations, the sins of men, while the candles represented Christ, the light of the world. It is customary to decorate it at the top with a 5-pointed star, the pentacle, which, although many people do not know it, is a symbol of the fulfilled man. Within ancient paganism, the mistletoe with which wreaths were made was used in the Celtic festivals of the winter solstice. The fact that it emerged directly from the mother tree was representative for them of humanity arising from divinity. That is, the material united with the spiritual, forming an inseparable and interdependent whole. The lighting of candles and bonfires as a Christmas ceremony is a continuation of that pagan custom of cheering the waning soul Invictus when it reaches its lowest point on the horizon. Fearing that the darkness of December would overcome the light and hide it, houses were decorated with holly, grass, mistletoe, and laurel. Since being evergreen leaves and remaining in the same state after being uprooted, they were a symbol of immortality. In addition, logs were lit, large bonfires were made, and candles were lit. This lighting during that night acted as a kind of imitative magic that tried to animate the sun. Therefore, in the archaic mentality, the illuminated trees were not only a symbol of fertility, but also of solar rebirth. The Christmas manger. Next, let's look at the manger. Its implementation was born after Saint Francis of Assisi, in 1223, had the idea of representing that sacred moment with people and animals. It was such a success that it continued to be held year after year, repeating the same performance. And the clues are there, for those who want to pay attention to them. At first glance, the figure of Jesus, the child Jesus, draws attention, who represents in this case not the historical figure, but the Christ who must be born in the heart, if we know how and where to look. Secondly, the eye is directed to two figures, Mary and Joseph, who, to the left and right, represent the two columns of the home, love and wisdom, respectively. They are the masculine and feminine elements essential to give birth. Behind us, we will see an ox and a donkey. These represent, on the one hand, the emotions and desires that must be submitted to the feet of the child, and on the other hand, as far as the donkey is concerned, it is the mind that betrays us with its theories and concepts, which must be domesticated. By the way, Christmas is already known to derive from birth. Christmas is birth. At the historical moment in which the sacred birth takes place, in the Bible, Matthew and Luke tell us that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, while Mark and John, they presuppose that his coming into the world occurred in Nazareth. So why is it said that the baby Jesus was born in Bethlehem? Again, it is ancient wisdom that will reveal to us that Bel is a Chaldean term that means fire. Therefore, Bethlehem is a symbolic expression that means tower of fire, relating the moment of birth to this golden mystery. One of the antecedents that can corroborate this statement is the Celtic festival of Beltane. The name meant Fire of Bel and was an annual festival in honor of the god Belanos. Also, Xeristus has the same meaning. Christ is the fire of the fire. Well, Jesus is born in a manger surrounded by rot and misery. If we are honest with ourselves and recognize when we live apart from God, that we are a sea of defects and weaknesses, the truth is that we are no better off than that holy child. That is what the manger tells us. Even so, the Star of Bethlehem comes to point out that there are always possibilities along the way if one knows where to go. That birth does not refer to when we come into the world, but to the possibility that always exists, to redirect our lives, clean that manger, and unite with the one who was always waiting for us, our spiritual Father. Finally, we have the piñata, which is one of the most typical elements of celebrations in Mexico, an internationally recognized symbol of this culture. It would be difficult to imagine Christmas celebrations without these colorful decorations, originally made of clay, filled with seasonal fruits such as techocote, jicama, lime, sugarcane, tangerine, orange, as well as peanuts, and various varieties of sweets. The piñata represents the conditioned human being, so that it is understood, we will say, that it rather represents his psychological aspect, conditioned to his soul, trapped in disordered appetites, desire, jealousy, fear, what in Christianity is known as the 7 deadly sins: lust, pride, anger, envy, greed, laziness, and gluttony, that is, the ego, which is contrasted with the so-called 7 virtues: chastity, humility, serenity, joy for the good of others, charity, industriousness, and temperance. For this reason, the piñata was originally always a star with 7 points. When talking about the psychological aspect, let us remember that the word psyche refers to the soul, and therefore everything related to the psychological aspect refers to soul issues and not to issues of the mind, although today it is related to the same. The piñata represents precisely that, the egoic aspect, which keeps our virtues, our emotional values, represented by candy, fruits, and toys, trapped, conditioned, disguised with beautiful colors, with a beautiful external appearance, but false, unreal. Let us remember that it important is not the piñata itself, but what it contains inside. Let us note that it is a rough container made of clay, although currently various materials are used. The mud is a symbol of the material world, of the dust of the earth, a symbol of the ego, that when the piñata breaks, when the ego is disintegrated, it releases the virtues, the soul values that it kept trapped. A child breaks the piñata. That child is blindfolded, deprived of sight. This symbolizes our essence or consciousness that is asleep. The stick is used, which symbolizes the will to end the ego, to break the piñata and thus release that part of our soul that keeps imprisoned, freeing it and recovering its soul values, beginning the path back to its authentic spiritual nature. This initial path is 9 days, represented by the 9 posadas, which go from December 16th to 24th.